Too early and too late. No one expected to see a stranger in Brookline until spring roads had dried another week or more. In fact, after the long isolation of winter, the villagers hardly were prepared to greet spring. Almost it seemed an affront to them when an eager young salesman came casually into the store for directions. "Do you know a Mr. Pratt around here?" he asked. The storekeeper managed a knowing "yup," without turning his head to look at his visitor. The salesman waited without luck for any elaboration on his question. "A plumber by trade," he offered. "Yup," answer was the same. "Well, could you direct me to where Mr. Pratt is?" he asked, warming to the situation. "Sure could," was the short reply. "Is it on this road?" "Nope, out by the cemetery." The salesman thought he was getting somewhere at last. "How'll I find him, then?" he asked. The storekeeper coughed lightly and said it without looking. "An old tree falls, not in a night, creaking and calm, while ants lie under its curling bark, and squirrels lie in its furling leaves, not in the soft alarm of dawn, when birds call and drum the morning on its hollow limbs. An old tree falls at the time of the whirlwind of its remembrances, after the night has written its name in lightning upon the scroll of the sky, and spoken its praise in sentences of thunder. An old tree falls at the time of the celebration of the winds, when there is argument in the weather and indecision in the seasons. An old tree goes to rest when the ringing winds wrench at its clinging roots, and the tempest tears at its branches like a hawk at a summer nest. Here is the decision. Dorr knew that if he allowed the loggers to cut his forest, it would be the right thing to do, though afterward his heart would feel as scarred as the hill after the work of the crew. By fall, pine limbs would be rust red and tinders, fewer green needles to shine against the sky. Undergrowth would be caught in the whirlwind of logging, the spared thin trees looking ready to die. Snow would cover the waste of the fallen birches, their limbs spalling before he could gather the wood. Brush would lie a barricade to his acres. Blackberries grow up where the timber stood. He visioned his maple grove piled high on the skidway. He had thought he never would let the maples go, or that ever in spring he would stand at their bleeding stumps, knowing it was the last time their sap would flow. This is an old man's help. An old man in a late spring, crying in his heart for help, does not sow his seeds alone. The winds come, and they broadcast his harrowed fields to weeds. An old man in a wet season can turn no length of furrows deep as eroding rain. The hill streams plow his meadow with more than the strength of oxen, again and again. An old man in a light harvest, wishing in his heart for sons, does not reap his crops alone. Crows come, and they gather the kernels. Blight fastens upon the stalks, and they wither before they are grown. An old man with failing hands strikes at the nearest weeds and points the stray rivulets away from his ailing lands. He raises his ineffectual arm and shakes his clenched fist at the willful crows. The struggle is not done, yet in his heart he knows his is the wild-growing farm. The unwritten poem. Chips are gathered like words I would gather to a poem, for the axe shines in my hands, wet with the tree's wasting sap. Something is dying in the world. I would render stone, gather the ore to fire, for now afield the sun pours gold to flowers. I would recall lightning, the mind's flash, for out of empty sky, in a splash of light, swallows dive. The poem flares on the kindled hills. It is traced indelibly on the invisible air. Before he shaped me in the vial of love, I slept as lightning in the hands of Jove. I was, with atoms, by strict law, impelled to be or not be stone, before love's fusion held. I waited eons for his step, to hear him touch the slab and call, "Your hour is near." Remember me in rain, spring rising in the thin dead grass, and that strange buoying of the wind. Here's at Morse's barn. It's such a simple thing to hang the scythe upon a wooden pin carelessly, as if you'd be right back to glean the hard, rough corners tomorrow. A cracked door ladders the light across the spider's broken wheels. A vine, gold in its dying, flings one tendril out, almost to touch the red rust-flaming blade, is nearest water. Now stand the rake against the sky. Against the sun the throat goes dry. Cease the rapt whisper of the blade. Hang the lean scythe in leaner shade. Walk straightway out by gold windrows, where by green signs the cool spring flows. 2 broad fields down, a sudden turn through cave of boughs, through door of fern, the crystal water on the stones. It is easy to be misjudged. Because I was late with the chores, having been to the fair, I climbed the hill in darkness to fetch the cow and milk her, fearing that longer delay would dry her udder as surely as if she had spent a day chanking windfalls and bloating under a sour apple tree. She took me to be a beast of the hills, and she ran away. My head still whirling with whirling wheels, I could still hear the spiels of the barkers and see the spinning lights and the freaks and the flashing of everything there on display. I walked toward her with halter and rope at a natural pace. I held the lantern steady and low at my hips. When she saw my stride change to the lope of a wolf, my hair grow bristly and coarse on my face, and my teeth become too long to be covered up by my snarling lips. It was not my intention to worry her or give chase. I thought only to prove to her that it was I whom she saw. But she had her mind made up, never to let fall on her back the weight of a he-wolf's paw. After an hour of running, I gave up her track. A neighbor who lives a mile away by road brought her back to her barn on the following day. He had found her, he said, entwined in the lines the family washing hung on. She was wearing his fanciest shirt over one horn, and the lace of a bright pillowcase adorned her round rear. On seeing her barn, there was certain delight in her eyes. You'd have thought she had really escaped the fate of a black bear's bite or the blade of a butcher's knife, and she looked more than pleased with herself that she'd saved her own life. His final move. They were leaving, taking only a few things: the re-stenciled Hitchcock chairs, the maplewood loom, his assortment of tools. The house seemed to fall back comfortably behind the hillside field, as it had for 50 years when one left for the valley. There was no need ever to return. She knew exactly how the stone walls and the distant lime trees looked. She knew how the rock river slide had scarred the face of Hunter's Mountain. She would see forever the way every season rested upon the orchard. He came back once and saw how younger folk had dealt with the barn, that white was no longer right for the clapboards, and that the old mullioned windows were wrong. He would never tell her of the changes or mention that the wooden swing where they sat together under the locust trees and watched the sunsets was gone. Inheritance. Do not let diminished light fall into that frame of shade where the cat lies in the sun. Do not let the porch flowers wither. Push back the rocking chairs, just enough that in case of rain they will not be spattered or rock empty in the wind. Say you saw the horses running side by side in the field, that the old red and white Ayrshire still enjoys her grazing. Look for the old paths, the stone walls, the maples. You will find the barn empty of worth, full of scythes and tools, the passed-on accumulation of lives. Notice that I had been there and left some things undone, that a square and a pencil still lie on the sawhorse. Say, it looked as if I would be coming right back.